Addiction is not the chain around the wrist, it is the chain around the mind. It is the quiet whisper promising relief, the subtle tug pulling you back into the shadows, the deceptive comfort that always ends in captivity. To the Stoic, addiction is not merely a habit of the body, but a distortion of the will, a surrender of sovereignty. To overcome it is not simply to stop a behavior, it is to reclaim the throne of one's inner kingdom. And so, the Stoic approaches addiction not with panic or shame, but with clarity, courage, and relentless discipline. Every addiction begins as an escape. A man reaches for a drink not for pleasure alone, but to silence a fear, numb a disappointment, or distract himself from his own unrest. Another dives into endless scrolling, compulsive desires, destructive comforts, not for joy, but for refuge from his untrained thoughts. The Stoic sees this pattern and understands its nature. What we run from grows stronger. What we face shrinks to its actual size. Addiction thrives in avoidance. Liberation thrives in confrontation. The first step to overcoming addiction is brutal honesty. Not the half-hearted confession whispered in the dark, but a warrior's declaration. I have surrendered my will to something weaker than me. This admission is not humiliation, it is awakening. Seneca wrote that a man who sees his faults is already on the road to correction. The addict becomes free the moment he refuses to lie to himself any longer. He looks at his chains, names them without flinching, and decides that their weight is no longer acceptable. But honesty alone is not enough. The mind enslaved by addiction must be understood, decoded, unraveled. The Stoic examines his cravings the way a general studies an enemy, calmly, rationally, without hatred. Cravings are not mysterious forces. They are associations etched into the nervous system, reinforced by repetition, strengthened by emotional pain. A craving is simply a thought insisting on its urgency. The Stoic reply, "You are only a suggestion." The power of addiction lies not in the substance or behavior, but in the belief that one must obey the craving when it speaks. The Stoic dismantles this illusion by separating sensation from judgment. A craving is a sensation, strong yes, uncomfortable yes, but still only a sensation. Judgment is the layer we add. I can't resist this. I need this. I will feel terrible without this. The Stoic strips away these judgments. He reduces the craving to its bare physical signature, a tightening of the chest, a heat in the stomach, a restlessness of the limbs. He watches it with the detachment of Marcus Aurelius observing his own thoughts passing like clouds. By observing without obeying, he breaks the link between impulse and action. Addiction thrives in darkness. The Stoic brings everything into the clear light of reason. But reason alone cannot defeat addiction. There must also be discipline, a discipline forged through repetition, courage, and a willingness to endure discomfort. The Stoic understands that withdrawal, whether physical, psychological, or emotional, is not a sign of weakness, but a necessary fire through which the soul must pass to emerge hardened and renewed. Seneca wrote, "The difficulty strengthens the mind as labor strengthens the body." Each moment of resistance is weightlifting for the will. The Stoic reframes discomfort as training. The shaking hands, the restless mind, the anxiety, the agitation, these become tests of character. "You will not break me," the Stoic whispers to the craving. "You will train me." Every battle won, no matter how small, is a brick placed in the rebuilding of identity. The addict begins to see himself as someone capable of victory. This shift is monumental. Once identity changes, behavior follows naturally.
Yet discipline alone is also not enough. Addiction is not only a habit of action, it is a habit of thought. The Stoic must uproot the beliefs that feed it. He asks himself, What void am I trying to fill? What wound am I trying to numb? What fear am I trying to silence? The Stoic does not fear these questions. He welcomes them. He understands that addiction is often an attempt to escape the responsibility of living consciously. It is easier to drift into pleasure than to confront the chaos of one's own mind. So he faces the chaos. He sits with his feelings, studies them, dissects them. He learns to breathe in discomfort instead of running from it. In this way, he grows stronger than the emotion that once drove him towards self-destruction. One of the Stoic's greatest tools in overcoming addiction is the distinction between what is within his control and what is not. He cannot control the intensity of cravings, the thoughts that arise unbidden, or the emotions that flare up unexpectedly. But he controls his actions. He controls the meaning he attaches to his cravings. He controls the habits he builds around his life. When he focuses solely on the controllable, addiction becomes less daunting. It loses its grandeur. It becomes a series of moments, each containing a choice. And in each moment, the Stoic chooses mastery. He also understands the role of environment. Epictetus taught that a man cannot maintain his virtue if he constantly places himself in situations that test it unnecessarily. The Stoic does not tempt himself. He clears his surroundings of triggers. He sets boundaries. He restructures routines. He designs his environment to support his highest intentions, not his lowest impulses. He becomes a guardian of his own mind. Another vital Stoic strategy is premeditation of temptation. Just as Marcus Aurelius began each day by anticipating difficult people, the Stoic battling addiction begins each day by anticipating moments of weakness. He prepares for them. He rehearses his responses. He says, "Cravings will come today. They will whisper. They will try to trick me, but I am ready." This preparation transforms surprise into expectation, and expectation into control. The Stoic also practices gratitude, not the superficial kind, but the deep, intentional recognition that life offers more than the narrow pleasures of addiction. Gratitude shifts attention from what the addict wants to escape to what he has the power to build. It reconnects him with purpose. It reminds him that the world is rich with meaning, far richer than the repetitive cycle of compulsion. Gratitude does not eliminate addiction overnight, but it weakens its emotional grip. Still, addiction is not defeated in a single moment. It falls through attrition, through thousands of small moments where the Stoic chooses clarity over craving. Progress is invisible at first. The mind rebels, the body complains, old habits return with renewed strength. But the Stoic understands that relapse is not the end, it is a lesson. It is information. It reveals where the structure is weak, where reinforcement is needed. The Stoic does not drown in shame. He adjusts his strategy. Shame paralyzes, wisdom mobilizes. He studies the relapse with the detachment of a scientist. What triggered it? What was I feeling? What belief did I accept in that moment? What lie did the addiction tell me? With each relapse, the Stoic grows wiser. He does not see himself as falling back to the beginning, but as refining his mastery. Over time, the relapses become less frequent, less intense, less seductive. Eventually, they cease to hold power.
As the Stoic continues this path, he begins to transform. His mind becomes clearer. His emotions stabilize. His self-respect grows. He no longer sees himself as a victim of internal forces, but as a commander of them. He rebuilds trust with himself. Every promise kept, every craving resisted, every moment of clarity earns him a newfound loyalty to his own spirit. He becomes the kind of person he once thought he could never be. In this process, he also learns one of the greatest Stoic truths. Freedom is not the absence of desire, but the ability to choose which desires to follow. Addiction robs choice. Stoicism restores it. The addict's world is narrow, controlled by one repeating want. The Stoic's world is wide, filled with purpose, discipline, clarity, and virtue. He no longer chases comfort, he chases excellence. He discovers that meaning, not pleasure, is what truly satisfies the soul. With time, the cravings diminish, the chains loosen, the mind becomes the master again, and the man who once felt powerless now stands unshakable. He realizes that overcoming addiction was not just about eliminating a habit, it was about forging a stronger version of himself. The addiction was the furnace. The Stoic mindset was the hammer. Discipline was the anvil, and the new self is the tempered blade. But the journey does not end with victory. The Stoic remains vigilant. He knows that the mind can regress if neglected, so he maintains the practices that led to liberation: honesty, reflection, discipline, restructuring environment, and daily recommitment to mastery. What was once survival becomes lifestyle. He cultivates virtue with the same intensity he once squandered on compulsion. He becomes a beacon to others, not by preaching, but by embodying what it means to be free. Ultimately, overcoming addiction is an act of reclaiming sovereignty. It is the restoration of the self to its rightful seat of command. The Stoic learns that the greatest victory is victory over the self, for no external conquest compares to the power of inner dominion. Addiction once whispered, "You belong to me." Now the Stoic responds, "I belong only to myself." And with that declaration, he steps fully into the life he was meant to live: clear, disciplined, unshackled, and sovereign.